What if the most influential food city in American history wasn't New York? What if it wasn't New Orleans or Chicago or San Francisco? What if the city that quietly reshaped what the world eats was built on factory floors, immigrant ambition, and the relentless hunger of a workforce that never stopped moving? The answer isn't where you'd expect. It never is. The city is Detroit. And welcome back to Dish Atlas. If you've never thought about Detroit as a food capital, hit subscribe, because by the end of this video, you absolutely will. Food number 1, the Coney Island hot dog. Walk into any diner in the Midwest and you'll find it on any menu. A steamed hot dog tucked into a soft bun buried under a river of beefy chili sauce, diced onions, and a stripe of yellow mustard. But the Coney Island hot dog has almost nothing to do with Coney Island, New York. It was born on the streets of Detroit in the early 1900s, carried there by Greek and Macedonian immigrants who landed in America with empty pockets and full ambitions. The most famous origin points to American Coney Island on Lafayette Street opened around 1917 by Gus Caros. It is a diner still operating today in virtually unchanged form. Here's the thing that blows people's minds. Two brothers, Gus and William Caros, eventually split and opened competing restaurants right next door to each other. They ran side by side for over a century. The Coney dog isn't just a meal, it's a monument to immigrant pride, family rivalry, and the stubborn refusal to back down. Food number 2, Vernor's ginger ale. From the heat of a chili dog, step into something cold and stinging and golden. Vernor's ginger ale is the oldest surviving soft drink brand in the United States. What? It's not Coca-Cola. It's not Dr. Pepper. You're in Detroit. The year was 1866. James Vernor, a pharmacist on Woodward Avenue, had been working on a ginger-flavored syrup before leaving to serve in the Civil War. When he returned 4 years later, he cracked open an oak barrel he'd left behind, and he found the aging had transformed it into something extraordinary. Sharp, creamy, almost vanilla warm, with a ginger bite that hits the back of the throat like a small, pleasant fire. For generations, Detroit parents gave Vernors to sick children the way others gave chicken soup. It was medicine, comfort, and celebration, all in one amber bottle. That's not a soft drink. That's a cultural inheritance. Food number 3, Sanders hot fudge. Not everything legendary came from struggle. Some things came from a man who simply refused to make anything ordinary. Fred Sanders opened his candy and ice cream shop in Detroit in 1875, and over time perfected a hot fudge sauce so rich, so deeply chocolate, so silky dark, that it made every other topping on earth feel like an afterthought. Sanders is widely credited as one of the originators of the American ice cream sundae, a claim with serious historical backing, given that his shop was among the first to serve ice cream topped with syrup as a distinct dessert item in the 1870s and 1880s. The sauce itself is almost absurdly simple. Chocolate cream, butter, and sugar. But the ratio, the temperature, the thickness. That's where decades of obsession live. In Detroit, Sanders hot fudge isn't a topping. It is the dessert. A jar of it given as a gift means more than most things money can buy. Food number 4, Detroit-style square pizza. Every pizza city thinks it invented the best pizza. Detroit didn't even bother with that argument. It just made something that couldn't be argued with. Detroit-style pizza is baked in blue steel rectangular pans originally used to hold small parts on automotive assembly lines. It emerged in the 1940s at Buddy's Rendezvous on Conant Street, where owner August Gus Guerra adapted his mother-in-law's Sicilian recipe to the thick, airy dough that the industrial pans naturally created. The cheese, which is Wisconsin brick, goes all the way to the edges, caramelizing into a crispy, lacy, almost burnt crust along the sides that is objectively the best part of any pizza ever made. The sauce goes on top of the cheese. That's not a mistake. That's the whole point. For decades, Detroit-style pizza was a local secret. Then, in the 2000s, it detonated across the country. Today, it's in every major city with a dozen chains built entirely around it. Gus Guerra didn't just make pizza, he rewrote the rules. Food number 5, the Boston Cooler. It sounds like it's from Massachusetts. It isn't. The Boston Cooler is a frothy, creamy float made from Vernor's ginger ale poured over vanilla ice cream. It is pure Detroit, and its name almost certainly comes from Boston Boulevard, a grand residential street on the city's west side. No one knows exactly when it was invented, but the drink has been a Detroit summer ritual for well over a century. The genius of it is the chemistry. It is when the carbonation of the Vernors hits the cold cream of the ice cream and creates a foam so thick and fragrant it barely resembles the sum of its parts. It tastes like childhood, like the end of a hot August day, like something your grandmother made without a recipe, because the recipe was just memory. In a city that has been through bankruptcy, abandonment, and reinvention, the Boston Cooler has never wavered. Some things are simply too good to disappear. Food number 6. Better made potato chips. In 1930, in the middle of the Great Depression, two immigrants named Peter Cipriano and Cross McCary decided to start a potato chip company in Detroit. That alone is either the bravest or most stubborn thing imaginable. Better Made Snack Foods was born on the city's east side, and it survived not by competing nationally, but by becoming irreplaceable locally. Better Made chips have a particular snap, a particular saltiness, a particular oil richness that Detroiters describe with the same reverence others reserve for regional barbecue. The company stayed small by design. It didn't chase supermarket shelf space in California or New York. It became the chip of one city completely and permanently. That model, hyper-local, unapologetically regional, unwilling to dilute itself for mass appeal is something the entire food industry is now trying to replicate. Better Made didn't follow that trend. It invented it. Food number 7, Middle Eastern fast food. Here's a fact that deserves more attention than it gets. Dearborn, Michigan, which is directly adjacent to Detroit, is home to one of the largest Arab-American communities in the United States, and the culinary ripple effects of that community on mainstream American food are immense. The shawarma wrap the hummus tub in every grocery store, the falafel option at chain restaurants. That mainstreaming of Middle Eastern flavors in America passed through Metro Detroit first, where Lebanese, Yemeni, and Iraqi families opened restaurants, bakeries, and markets for decades before these foods were considered trendy. The Dearborn community didn't adapt their food to American palates. They held the line, cooked it right, and waited for America to catch up. And America did. When food historians track how tahini went from specialty import to grocery staple, the road runs directly through Michigan. That's not a footnote. That's a transformation. Food number 8, Domino's Pizza. We know you were waiting for this one. In 1960, a 23-year-old named Tom Monahan borrowed $500 and took over a single failing pizza store in Ypsilanti, just outside Detroit, called Dominic's. He renamed it Domino's. What he built wasn't just a pizza company, it was a logistics revolution disguised as a dinner option. Monahan had an obsessive focus on delivery speed. His famous 30 minutes or it is free promise was later retired for safety reasons. But that promise fundamentally changed what Americans expected from food service. The idea that hot food could come to you reliably and fast wasn't obvious in 1960. Monahan made it feel inevitable. Domino's now operates in over 90 countries and has more than 19,000 locations worldwide. It is one of the most geographically distributed food brands on Earth, and it started with one man, one borrowed $500, and one small store in a Michigan college town with a dream that tasted exactly like ambition. Food number 9, packaged bread and industrial baking. Not every food revolution looks delicious in the moment it begins. Some of them look mechanical. Some of them look almost boring. A loaf of white bread in a waxed wrapper doesn't seem like the kind of invention that changes a country. It doesn't sizzle. It doesn't perfume the air. It doesn't arrive at the table with drama. But in 20th century America, few foods mattered more. And one of the cities that helped make that kind of bread possible at scale was Detroit. To understand why, you have to understand what Detroit was becoming in the early 1900s. This was not just a city of factories. It was the city where the logic of the factory became a philosophy. Standardize the part. Simplify the motion. Remove friction. Increase output. Make it identical every single time. That thinking changed automobiles first. Then it seeped into everything else. furniture, appliances, packaging, distribution, and eventually food. Bread had once been intensely local. You bought it from a neighborhood baker or baked it yourself. It varied from block to block, from family to family, from season to season. Some loaves were dense, some were uneven, some went stale by the next morning. Consistency was not expected because consistency was not possible. But industrial baking promised something radical. A loaf that looked the same every week. A slice that fit the toaster. A product light enough, cheap enough, and stable enough to feed an entire urban workforce whose life was now governed by shifts, clocks, and speed. Detroit was the perfect place for that transformation because Detroit had already trained America to trust the machine. Major baking operations tied to the wider industrial corridor helped normalize the idea that bread did not have to come from a flour-dusted neighborhood oven. It could come from a plant. It could be wrapped, stacked, trucked, shelved, and purchased with the same confidence people placed in mass-produced tools and auto parts. The miracle of packaged bread was never romance. It was reliability. And reliability changes behavior. Once families could buy sliced packaged bread in predictable form, whole categories of American eating accelerated. School lunches became easier to assemble. Factory workers could carry sandwiches to the line. Diners and lunch counters could serve toast and club sandwiches at speed. Convenience was no longer a luxury. It was becoming a national expectation. What looked like softness in a bag was industrial confidence made edible a factory city's worldview sliced neatly enough for breakfast. Detroit didn't invent hunger for that kind of food. It built the systems that taught Americans to organize their meals around efficiency. That may sound unglamorous compared with pizza or chili dogs, but it is every bit as revolutionary. Because once a city helps industrialize bread, it is helping industrialize daily life itself. Breakfast gets faster, lunch becomes portable, dinner becomes something that can be improvised around what is already in the kitchen. Uniform slices created uniform habits, and uniform habits are how a nation changes without even noticing. That is the hidden pattern running through Detroit's food history. It is not only about recipes, it is about formats. It is about the translation of appetite into systems that can serve millions. The city did not just give America foods to crave. It gave America new ways to produce, package, and repeat them. In Detroit, even bread became part of the assembly line dream. Food number 10, the Michigan hot dog. And now, after factories and delivery empires and immigrant diners, we end with something wonderfully strange. A food that carries the name of one place, lives most famously in another, and survives because people kept believing in a flavor long after the geography got blurry. In parts of upstate New York, especially around Plattsburgh and Watertown, the Michigan hot dog is not a novelty. It is a civic tradition. A snappy, natural casing dog in a soft bun topped with a loose, meaty sauce that sits somewhere between chili and memory. Ask where it came from, and again you get the same answer. Michigan. More specifically, Detroit's hot dog culture. That answer matters because foods almost never keep a borrowed name for a century unless the identity attached to that name carries real weight. Somewhere in the 1920s, a recipe traveled east, maybe in the hands of migrants, maybe through family, maybe through the invisible trade routes of diners and roadside stands that linked working-class America together long before food television made every origin story famous. However it moved with enough force that another region adopted it and never let go. And the resemblance is not subtle. The sauce on a Michigan dog echoes the logic of Detroit's Coney sauce so closely that the kinship is hard to miss. The finely textured meat, the warmth of the spice, the way the sauce settles into the bun instead of sitting politely on top. These are not random similarities, they are fingerprints. What upstate New York kept was not just a topping. It was a Detroit idea about what a hot dog could be: messy, savory, fast, cheap, and somehow bigger than the sum of its parts. There is something almost poetic about ending here, because the Michigan hot dog proves that influence does not always travel with perfect documentation. Sometimes it travels through taste, through habit, through one stand copying another one cook, teaching another one family, carrying a recipe across state lines, because it reminded them of home, or opportunity, or the place where they first learned how to make a dollar stretch. By the time historians arrive asking for clean records, the food is already rooted somewhere new. That does not make the legacy weaker, it makes it more American. Detroit's greatest culinary impact has never been about polished luxury or fine dining prestige. It has been about durable foods built for workers, immigrants, families, and people in motion. Foods that could survive long shifts, tight budgets, bitter winters, and the endless churn of reinvention. Foods with grease on them. Foods with story in them. Foods made by people who understood that feeding a city means more than impressing it. So look back at this list and the pattern becomes unmistakable. A hot dog created by immigrants and turned into civic mythology. A ginger ale that became medicine in a bottle. Hot fudge elevated into devotion. Pizza shaped by auto part pans. A float that tastes like summer memory. Potato chips that proved regional loyalty could defeat scale. Middle Eastern food that changed the American mainstream by refusing to apologize for itself. Domino's turning delivery into expectation. Bread transformed by industrial logic. A hot dog sauce carried across state lines until a distant town wore the name like a badge. 10 foods, 1 city. And beneath all of it, the same engine driving forward. Detroit took movement and turned it into culture. It took labor and turned it into appetite. It took immigrant ambition, factory discipline, neighborhood pride, and an almost unreasonable belief that things could always be made better, faster, hotter, cheaper, or more unforgettable. And it stamped that belief onto the American table. That is why Detroit matters. Not because it asked for culinary credit. Not because it marketed itself as a capital of taste, but because it changed how America eats while the rest of the country was busy looking somewhere else. Quietly, repeatedly, permanently. If this changed how you see Detroit or how you see the hidden machinery behind everyday food, give this video a like and subscribe to Dish Atlas. And in the comments, tell us which of these Detroit inventions surprised you the most.